Welcome to Resilience Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Ostrolenk. This show is about building better humans, institutions, and systems. On the show, I'll be interviewing many different experts from across many different fields, including human optimization, health and fitness, team building, mind-body medicine. In the institutional space, we're looking at different institutions and how we can create new ones, new models and maps, including in medicine, in education, in intelligence community, in law enforcement, in the military, especially in the special operations community. Thanks for being here and enjoy the show. Today, I'm joined by James Michael Sama, an internationally recognized speaker, author, and personal development coach focused on confidence, relationships, and purposeful living. His work has reached tens of millions of people worldwide with features in outlets like CNN, CNBC, Huffington Post, and CBS. James brings a grounded, practical voice of personal growth, helping people translate insights into real-world action. I'm excited to talk to you today, James.
I'm excited to be here, sir. Thank you for this. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And also want to point out you're the author of a few books here, which we'll be talking about today, which is
Yes. Yes.
awesome. I've been really enjoying those as well. But before we jump into your books and some of the other really cool offerings, James, tell us how did you get into personal growth and development and coaching?
You know, it was a fluke, really. I'd say, let's see, 2013. So 13 years ago now at this point, which is strange to think about. It's been that long. I started just writing my ideas. I had wanted to start a blog. At the time, blogging was a big thing. And I had started one previously, and like most other people, you sort of abandoned it. It didn't really go anywhere. And then maybe a year or two after that, I started getting the idea to do it again. I would write a lot of Facebook statuses, inspirational statuses. I was always the annoying guy with the inspirational quotes. But they started to gain a little traction, and I started to wonder and in fact, I share every once in a while a post from my Facebook memories where I say, I'm thinking of starting a blog, but would anybody actually read it? And now, 40 plus million readers later, it's kind of funny to read that.
That's
But
pretty
I,
good.
I read, I started writing these articles just on a free WordPress blog. It was my name, it wasn't anything fancy. And they started gaining a little traction. I just was sharing my ideas about relationships and confidence building and things I had gone through in my own journey over the years. Long story short, one of those articles started developing some steam and went from a couple of thousand views on a Tuesday to by Friday had generated over 1.5 million views in one day.
Holy
Um,
man.
to this day, I cannot tell you how it happened. I have no idea who shared it, how it happened, and it just kept skyrocketing. That one article is over 8 million views by itself. Um, so that led to sort of a spark of, wait a second, people are looking for insight around topics like this. And I started getting calls from radio stations and television stations and people asking me for advice. And I said, well, I have to do something with this. So I really started diving into, what is it that's catching people's attention? What do people need help with? What is the missing link here? And I wrote more and I spoke more and it skyrocketed into something that I said, well, I can maybe make a career out of this.
That is awesome. So prior to that, what was your career leading up to doing this?
I had no idea what I was going to do. My career was floating. I had a couple of marketing things. My degree is in marketing,
Okay.
but very limited in terms of any sort of full-time. I was always very, resistant to structure. I grew up in an entrepreneurial environment. Everybody in my family has their own thing going on, so I was doomed from the start. I was figuring it out at the time.
So, like, what inspired you to just even start writing? To begin with on relationships and confidence and personal growth. Like, was something going on in your life that like led you to like reflect on yourself, saying, "I think this would be of value to other people reading these things."
Yeah, so I struggled a lot, and I've been very open about this. I mean, the first 20 years of my life were pretty much a train wreck when it came to dating. I had no idea what was going wrong. And my parents are in a great marriage. They still are 40 plus years later. In fact, I just saw somebody at the gym now who said, oh, geez, your parents are the goal couple, right? So I grew up around that healthy love environment. And when I started trying to date myself, I realized that it wasn't actually working, and I got frustrated about, well, what's the disconnect here? What are people missing? What's not going right? So that led to research into, social dynamics, attraction, dating, relationships, and wanting to infuse my opinions into what I thought people were messing up, honestly.
Having done this for quite a while now, do you see something in terms of the social dynamics differently from when you first started to 2026 now?
Good question. I wish I could say yes, because I feel like things have changed, but I think a lot of the same
Mm.
problems have just perpetuated, if not gotten even worse because of, how much more prominent social media has become even over the past few years. I think a lot of the same things have still the cycle continues. People are frustrated.
I saw your post a couple of days ago, and I encourage everyone to follow your work. It's great about the stats on men
Yes.
engaging this heterosexually, men engaging women or not in terms of young men.
Yes.
I mean, it'd be great just for this conversation's sake. Can you repeat some of those stats, like the unfortunateness of what we're seeing with young men?
Yeah, so it's from Date Psychology, which is a website that does some of these studies and everything, and it was 48% of men. I may have these numbers reversed, but I know that they are essentially accurate. It's 48% of men between 18 and 25 have never approached a woman in person for a date, and 45% of men between 26 and 40
Mm.
haven't approached a woman in person in the past year. So, generally speaking, 40 to 50% of men are essentially doing nothing in person when it comes to dating. Now, online dating, obviously, right,
Mhm.
is a different story. But as we know, I mean, that creates a reliance on text interaction, having to stop and think about what you say. Who knows now what people are doing in terms of crafting messages on dating apps with ChatGPT, right? So, where is the actual ability to sit down and connect and have a real conversation? And those numbers, I think, reflect a future that is very uncertain in those aspects. Because if you have a 25-year-old man who has never spoken to a woman in person, as far as going up and cold approaching, let's say, where does that lead in terms of the ability to maintain then a long-term relationship and communicate and hear somebody's feeling? It's a bit daunting, I think.
Yeah, I've seen recent research on the reduction of empathy in the younger generation because of this technology, and I imagine this kind of plays into that because empathy requires you to actually pay attention, be curious, and engage another human being and try to understand them, let alone
Mm.
care about them.
Well, and when you think about that, it's almost antithetical to the environment that most of the younger generation is growing up in. Because, and I think we're all, I don't know if I want to use the word victims of this or just sort of immersed in this reality, but everything is curated. It's catered. It is your interests, your algorithm. What you clicked on last is now flooding you constantly. So everything is so highly tailored to the individual. We're not even really being programmed to think, oh, what is this other person feeling? How should I step outside of myself? It's just, and if you grow up with that as your core, as your foundational base, when you reach, when you become a teenager or get into, I mean, where were those formational years spent? It basically just feeding your own algorithm with things you like.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I work with some young men, and their parents actually the ones who reach out to me,
Mm.
and what they'll say is like, "Hey, my son is generally a good guy. He's very kind. He's good-hearted. He has no grit and resilience, front side focus. He's lost. He has no why. Nothing drives him in his life." Holy shit. So between everything you just said, the empathy, the technology, and perhaps, and of course, these are just cases, personal conversations. There's not, I don't have research to say every young man is like this or most are
Sure.
going to look at him. But it just seems like we're creating a whole generation of, and it's particularly young men, but we can also talk about women who don't
Mhm.
necessarily end up being what you might call good men, or at least don't have
Well,
the capacities and skills in order to do that. Talk about a little bit about this book and what you're seeing and how you're helping people, in this case, men, become good men.
that's a big part of the reason why I wrote that book because at this stage in life we are a lot of these men, and I know that the most recent generation, like we've got a 10 and a 6-year old, so they're really fully immersed in it. But even you step up one or two generations, and obviously we've all been part of this news system, right? So you've got people now who are having kids have already sort of grown up in this environment. So the lessons and the values, and as you said, the empathy. I mean, I think we've already started to see a bit of a dissipation of that.
Mhm.
So a lot of and then what's going to happen when our kids have kids, and ooh, so this is sort of supposed to be designed as a bit of a safeguard against that, and to say, hey, here's a bit of a guide. Here's something you can refer back to for multiple different areas. I mean, there's the love in there, obviously. There's success, there's legacy, there's multiple different areas of life that you can latch onto and learn from. And that's my goal with the book, is to have it at least be something people can hold on to, pass down, and say, hey, if you need some guidance in this area, check out tenet number 71 or something.
Right, right, right. Well, and there are 100, so I'm not gonna
Yes.
have to go through all 100. But why is it important for boys to become good men?
Oof, oof. I mean, how much time do we have on the podcast? It's, I think it permeates every area of life, because you've got, and not even leadership, and I want to be obviously uh realistic about the world that we live in, right? Like there's leadership is very diverse, as it should be. Heads of household are very diverse, as it should be. There is no conversation of men rule the world, so they need to be healthy men. That's not, thankfully, that's not where we are. So, that being said, though, we are part of it. We are in relationships, in marriages, raising children, whether we are running a company or an employee in a company. I mean, it's there are men everywhere, just as there are women everywhere. So if you've got swaths, generations of these men who are incapable of A, B, and C, that then essentially have almost a mass replacement. You've got just a wave of them coming up into the professional world, starting to date, starting families on a mass scale. What does that look like if they're all generally lost
Yeah.
and can't turn to each other for guidance, because it's the blind leading the blind?
Right.
So I think that there's it's, I won't say it's an emergency, but it's worth looking at.
Uh, somewhere between worth looking at and emergency. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, try not to be an alarmist, but
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I understand. So, what did you learn about yourself writing the 100 Tenets of a Good Man? And what might you say in that process of possibly self exploration, areas that you're like, oh, here's areas that I could grow in and that maybe still are growing in?
so it's funny you say that, because I even with the first book too, 2017, I think it was. I mentioned this in an interview a few weeks ago, and a lot of the writing that I tend to do, at least especially in the beginning, I was in a lot of ways speaking to myself. I would like my own personal challenges, or almost instructing me in the
Mhm.
third person,
Mhm.
and putting these things out there to the world. And if they resonate with people, then great. And I think that was sort of the unintentional secret sauce
Mhm.
of how the writing began. And I've had countless people tell me I just feel like I'm reading something from a friend. Like I feel like I'm reading a letter from a friend. The way that I write in, because it was sort of for myself. So I mean, what did I learn about myself? Pretty much every point in there is a reminder to me.
All 100
Um,
Tenets.
all of it. It's like, who do I want to be?
Mhm.
What do I consider to be the ultimate man, so to speak, if I could. And I'm light years away from that, believe me. I'm not writing these books from an ivory tower saying I have it all figured out.
Mhm.
I'm saying, if I were to evolve into that ultimate version, what would I want that to look like? And then I write it down.
That. But let me circle back to this kind of the same question, but ask it more in the present moment, not necessarily when you wrote the book.
Yep.
Yeah, what are your kind of cutting edges in terms of your own development these days? Like, what are you focusing some of your time, energy, and resources on personally?
Mm. It's interesting. Before we got on the call, we had talked about, um, travel,
Yeah,
Italian heritage for me, particularly, and all of that.
yeah,
And I think everybody in my family is tired of hearing me talking about it right now. But I look forward, but one of the things that I have done in past years that I think has been very helpful, actually, is looking back to foundational self identity. Everything I say is identity. You've probably seen me say it a million times.
yeah, yeah.
Connection with, like, where did I come from? Is there heritage, legacy? What I we have a marble table in the living room from my grandmother, from like an Italian marble table, right? And I look at that every day, and I think that's something that has lasted. It's something that reminds you of somebody and gives you those positive memories of the person. So when I look ahead, I spend a lot of time reconnecting with the past and thinking about how they connect. Who do I want to be moving forward as a foundational human? Like, what do I want people to remember about me someday? And is what I'm doing today reflective of that? Like, am
I
I
love
writing the story today that I do want to be read tomorrow?
right. I love that. Kind of living in your embodying your future self now.
It's everything. I think it's everything. If you ask yourself, you have the ultimate version of you that walks in the room. Say it's 5 years from now, and this person comes into the room and sits down with you face to face, and they have a conversation with you. It's like, what is that person? What are they doing in their career? What does their relationship look like? What does their social life look like? Are they disciplined? Are they fit?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then being honest about the gap between the two. What am I not doing today that that person would be doing? And you do it. Start doing it.
Right, 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 right. I love that. So yeah, obviously you're a writer, and I know you write on Medium too. I'll encourage people to check you out on Medium. But you also do coaching. Like you actually work
Yes,
with individuals and such. Well, talk us through some of the who you work with, why you work with them, and kind of the different vehicles you use to work with a wide variety of different people. Because I know you also do a group too.
I do. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So the group is within the past year. I've restarted a group. The coaching has been my full time venture for more than a decade now. So it's multi layered. You got the writing, some speaking, coaching, all that stuff, as you know. Uh, and we're on similar wavelengths. So the coaching, yeah, primary and part of the irony of this was that when I first started writing X amount of years ago, I wanted to serve men. I wanted to help men overcome some of the challenges that I had overcame. And they didn't want to hear it. They
Mm.
figured, they were, who is this random guy thinking he's better than me on the internet, which is not what I wanted to do, but here we are. It's the internet. And so the majority of my readers and my clients became women. So a lot of the stuff transitioned to, let me write for women and serve women and coach women and all that. But I've always had male clients. So, but the thing they always have in common, and they're professionally successful, but personally conflicted.
Yeah.
Like the thing that I see with a lot of them is they've put decades maybe into their career,
Hmm.
or they've made decisions for a spouse, kids, relationships, shareholders, and they kind of forget who they are in the process.
Hmm.
So they, after reading a lot of my writing around healthy relationships and self-talk and identity, they kind of come to me for a recalibration of, wait a minute, who am I? Where do I want to be going next? And how do I refill my cup, so to speak, so I can show up better? So clients are typically CEOs, founders, executives, entrepreneurs, people that carry all this weight with them and don't really have any place to put it down or anybody to talk to about it because they're supposed to be, head honcho.
Right, right, right. So you're like well, like a coaching whisperer.
The CEO whisperer. Yeah,
CEO,
that
CEO whisperer. I like that. Okay, CEO whisperer. I like that. But you also have written another book on
mm,
love relationships too.
yes.
Top 10 keys to finding the love of your life. Talk a little bit about that, and then how that plays out also in your coaching space too.
So that because the foundation of all of this was from writing about dating and relationships. It was before I had gotten into, identity and purpose and fulfillment and all that. It was relationships. So that book was really, and the last part of that subtitle, Keys to Finding the Love of Your Life, even if it's you,
Mm.
because I wanted that to be a journey of sort of inward reflection, self-love. How do I become comfortable and confident with myself before I even go out to build a relationship? Because that's a big, and I'm sure maybe you've seen this too in your work. It became clear that a lot of people were pursuing relationships before they were actually ready.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, they started coming back and saying, actually, I think I need to work on myself.
Mm.
So that book is sort of designed as this journey of, let me reflect on my needs, what I want, questions I haven't asked myself before, really gain a clearer understanding of that, and then how can I tactfully and intentionally bring that to a new relationship?
Do you find when you ask your clients, what do you need, that one or two things will happen? they're not really clear on their own needs. And if they are, it's very abstract as opposed to concrete actions that they prefer in a relationship.
Most people have virtually no idea what they
Yeah.
need, you know? And I think it's a symptom of just not having had the conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you've seen, but I mean, I don't really think we foster that
Nope.
in the mainstream, especially for men.
Hmm.
Um, so, it's never really something that's broached early on, and then you get into this cycle of I'll go to college or I'll go to trade school, I'll try to make as much money as I can, I'll get into this job, and the cycle continues without any pause or reflection.
Yeah. I've heard you use reflection quite a bit, including referencing your books, but also just in
Mm.
general conversation. And I'm wondering how that plays in your life. Do you have a practice that you do on a regular basis? Do you journal, meditate? How do you do your own self reflection? And then how do you encourage your clients to do the same?
Go to the gym.
Okay.
I have to admit, I've never really been a journaler. I've never been deep into meditation, music, the gym, driving. If I can just take some time to kind of settle and reset,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's how I don't have any magic pill for that.
Mhm.
I kind of just plow through things when needed, and I find solace in productivity.
Okay. So
You know,
keeping busy allows you to kind of work through things to think through things.
it's I need to
Yeah.
find a solution, read something. I mean, I do as much reading as I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, learning about, people that have achieved greatness and what drove them and really understanding like the fundamental pieces of a good life.
Well, seeing your vehicle, which I've seen online, you like spend time in your car.
It's always been since I was literally since I was born, cars have always been my driving force. Literally, that's no pun intended, but yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And gym time, it's really interesting because obviously you do it for physical health and fitness and stuff like that. But it's really cool to hear you also say, sounds like it's a time also kind of to do some thinking and reflection too.
I think because it gives you that space to sort of just focus, connect physically with one's self
Hmm.
and not and I mean there's pros and cons, right? Because obviously, to have my music, I need my phone. And if I'm have my phone in my hand, then I'm seeing notifications. So it's hard to completely disconnect. But
Hmm.
but I think having that dedicated space is vital for sure.
Yeah, I'm in New York and I'm not doing this regularly during winter time because it's been like 12 degrees, but
Yeah.
I'm a rucker. And actually,
Yes.
I did go rucking a couple of days ago. But very similar. Like I find that time, and I'm in the city, but I'm also there's really nice land, like non-city life just over there, and just being either in nature or even in the busy city, walk
Mm,
heavy weights, but walking for me is like also the opportunity for some self reflection. And I agree with you. It's interesting on the phone. So like I got to be really mindful of not like getting distracted. Plus, I got to be mindful of being safe in a city. So like
mm,
ideas come up. I'm like, oh, how do I record these things? So it's the fun. The phone is useful for those purposes too. Did,
yes.
when you come up with the ideas for your books, like do you do they just come fully formed? Are you like, is it like you writing for Medium? You're like, this would be a great book. Like how do the book ideas come? And how do you
The
the opportunities to write them?
Yeah, the first book was largely influenced by a lot of the articles I had written previously. Oh, it was almost a consolidation of, how do I get all of these ideas? How do I share all these ideas in one place, easily digestible? Yeah. And I do find that it's like writing begets more writing. It's like the more that or if there's one thing I'm very I don't talk about things I'm quote unquote good at. I'm not that type of person, despite what it looks like on social media, which I know is a different message than most people would get. But if there's one thing that I can say that I'm good at, I almost visualize sentences in my head. I visualize sentence structure. I think about the way people are gonna receive something that I write, where the comma goes, down to the little tiny things.
Wow.
So that's something that I always think through in terms of, like what type of wording will resonate with this book. For example, the tenet, right? Like I have the 48 Laws of Power here from Robert Greene, which amazing book, but laws has been used. Think Tenet. Tenet is something that really carries some weight. It's got depth to it. I wanted to use a weightier term. So I always think through those things in terms of a branding standpoint. Maybe it's my marketing background, but it's like, how is this going to land with the reader? And I do that when it comes to tweets, to articles, to book titles, to the substance of books. I'm always running through it in my head, and then it just kind of flows out. I've had previous, freelance gigs when somebody would send me a variety of topics, whether it's a quote or an article title, and then want me to expand on the article. And I would literally take a line, one quote presented to me, and write, a 500 or 1,000 word article based on that one line. So I can kind of extrapolate things from a concept.
Yeah.
Very few things I can say that I'm good at, but that's one thing that I have built a career on.
That is awesome. I love that. Visually, I'm watching like the sentence turn into a whole article,
That's
a whole book. That's cool.
exactly what and good ideas in is good ideas out. I have spent way too much time online the past few decades. I have, and you think through things of it's like you've stuffed your head with so much inspiration that it's looking for a medium to escape to, you know?
You have books behind you. You mentioned earlier that you're a reader. You're obviously a
Yes.
writer, write your own.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are there any formative books? You're like, man, these one or two or three books have been really key to the person I am or am becoming.
100%. Yes. I'm glad that you said that. And if I wouldn't knock the whole thing over, I'd pull them out and give them to, but um I'm sure, as you've heard before, and I have probably a top, maybe five. If I really had to narrow it down to three, I could. Probably things you've heard before. So, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. If it just as of written 2,000 plus years ago, Roman emperor, right in the middle of war on the Tiber River, talking about Stoic thoughts and philosophy, and to read words translated, of course, but to read these concepts that are just as relevant today as they were then, it really speaks to the universality of the human experience. So I love diving into concepts like that. Meditations for sure, or Letters from a Stoic with Seneca, depending on your preference. The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene.
Right, right.
Absolutely. That is a book that a lot of people I give it to don't actually like,
Hmm.
because a lot of the concepts, I'll clarify the point. They don't like that it's true.
Okay, that's interesting.
Right. Because a lot of the points in that book, somebody told me that it sounded Machiavellian because it felt like you were being manipulative.
Yeah,
I don't want
I
to go ahead.
do that because it's interesting. A couple months ago, I was talking to my girlfriend, and she works in kind of corporate space as a coach, and she's talking about the politics there, and I'm like, I'm so anti politics, but and I was like, that's silly, like because it's human beings. And I'm a therapist, and I've for 30 years now, and all relations are some degree expression of politics, whether it's inside of a family or a team or a corporate space or the military. So I'm like, okay, I need to, for me personally, better understand this. So I've been diving into Machiavelli.
Mhm. Yes. The Prince. Did you read The Prince?
One. I've been listening to people talk about not his book, but his concepts.
Mhm.
I do better visually, so I was like it's on YouTube. I've been watching tons of YouTube videos. Um,
Yes.
so I do need to read his book, but I've been reading people talking about his book first.
Yes.
But to your point, I'm like, I bet if you would have asked me a couple years ago to look into them, like, oh, I don't, that's manipulation. So I appreciate your friends pushing back on you.
And
That's
I'm
how-
very open about that. I don't say I'm not saying I condone the things in the book. Like, that's the big difference. Like, you have to look at it from sort of a pragmatic standpoint, and ask honestly, is this true or is this not true?
Mhm.
Whether or not I actually like it or agree with it or think it's how things should be.
Yeah.
I think the book, rather than an instructional manual of how to act and how to treat people, is more of a guide to understanding the realities of how people operate. If nothing else but self-protection, to be able to recognize if somebody is being manipulative, how to navigate that,
Yeah.
and just understand the realities of how humans have always worked.
Agree.
Again, whether or not we like it. And
Well, I think that distinction is really key because it's
yes,
not because you just the request is not to live in fantasy, but live in reality and
right.
navigate it appropriately. Doesn't mean you don't have
And
a set of high values and you can decide not to do the things, but at least you're aware of the dynamics going on.
I think that's and the more that the more aware of it you are, of course, like anything else, the more you see it play out
Yeah, yeah.
in day-to-day life. I have a client who's a member of a private club, private membership club, and um, that feels like a very condensed atmosphere where a lot of those dynamics do play out. You're meeting a lot of business people, you're dressing a certain way that's being perceived a certain way. It feels like a sort of a little fishbowl where you get to observe the realities that play out in books like this, and you go, "Oh, there is something to that." Um, so that it's a fascinating one. I love How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale
Okay.
Carnegie
Uh,
classic.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know,
Right.
um, uh, Never Split the Difference, Chris
Who-
Voss.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So Chris Voss was a FBI hostage
Yeah.
negotiator.
Yeah, yeah. Right,
Yeah,
right. Okay.
that's a great book on negotiation. Again, like communication skills, how people really get what they want. How to navigate that. That's a really good one.
Nice.
I'm almost done with The First Tycoon about Cornelius Vanderbilt.
Okay. Nice.
Fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff.
We'll include links in the show notes to your book recommendations.
Oh, God, I'll send you a picture of the shelf and you can just put all the links. There's so many things, Michael.
That'd be
I
cool.
mean, it's
I love it.
I love it.
And I also want you to talk before we can kind of conclude this conversation
Yeah.
about your group because
Yes.
you write, you've written books, you write for Medium, you're all over social media, and definitely at the end I'll ask you to plug your own places for people to find your work. But you also run a group that you said
Yes.
just restarted about a year ago. Can you talk about the group?
Yeah, I'd love to. So the group is called the Round Table, and it really stemmed from all of these conversations that I would have with private clients. Right now, I've got 15 or 16 private clients, and each time I'll have a conversation. And I mean, these people, they're all over the Sydney and London and New York, and you get such a variety of perspectives and have so many incredible deep conversations as you can relate to with your work. There was a time just over this past summer that it really hit me, and I said, you know what? What would happen if we got all these people in the same place?
Yeah,
Like how could these conversations evolve if everyone was in, granted, a Zoom space, but the same space?
yeah, yeah.
And I floated the idea to a few clients. Everybody was immediately on board. And since then, it has continued growing. It's remained consistent. We meet virtually on Zoom every week. And there's people it's great because I mean, in us, it's Thursday afternoons for us. And then our member in Sydney, it's Friday morning for him. And you've got, it's such a cool thing to get all these people together. We talk about mindset, philosophy, lifestyle, family, legacy, success, you name it.
That is awesome. All right, so your books, your the group you run, the writing you do for Medium. Where can people find all those wonderful things that you do?
So so many different. So the thing that I really drive people to, I think the most is the newsletter. I've got about 15,000 subscribers on my newsletter. I send it out. It's free. It's secretweaponnewsletter.com. I think the newsletter is like a good hub for everything. 100tenets.com is the book.
Okay.
And then all of my social media is at James M. Sama. Those are all the hubs right there.
Awesome. We'll definitely include all those in the show notes. Before we finish up for this morning, if you're going to leave one thing for our listening audience to think about that could help improve their life, whether it's a guy who wants to be a good man or
Mhm.
a woman who wants a good man,
Yes.
or
Yes.
whatever happens to be, what might that be?
Okay, so the word that comes to mind is the word that I just use over and over again, which is identity. I think the biggest thing I've seen people really lacking is clarity around the true authentic identity that they want to choose for themselves. I would and I've had clients do this and I would say write yourself two things. Write yourself think like a brand, think like a corporation, think like a company. Write yourself a mission statement
Mm,
as large companies do. And they said, this is what drives us. This is what we're here for. It's why we exist. People don't do that. Have a short few lines, a mission statement. Why am I here? What am I trying to achieve? Secondly, that goes along with that is a set of core values.
mm,
Like what are your 4 or 5 tenets that you live
mm.
by? What are the core values that you hold dearest? And if you, I mean, I don't know, print them out, have them embossed, do something ridiculous with it. Have a reminder consistently of this is what I stand for. This is what I'm working to achieve. And now that's my roadmap. That is the core foundation of my identity. And every decision I make on a regular basis should reinforce all of these things, or at least most of them, if I'm serious about being the person that I want to be. And I think if people did that one thing, or the two things, the mission statement, the core identity, if they did that, life would become far simpler, not necessarily easier, simpler because decisions are filtered through a preset system where you go, if I make a decision based on these criteria, I know it's the right decision for me.
I love that.
And
That's
that
awesome.
can change everything.
100%. Well, James, thank you. I've enjoyed this conversation. I
Yes, sir.
want to encourage folks to check out your books.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I'll
Yes,
see you
sir.
online here soon enough.
Yes, sir. I'm looking forward to it.